The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to Faith Matters for another week here on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, and pastor at Broad Creek United Methodist Church. Also, Reverend Robert Carnegie is with us from Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle, and Dr. Bob Wilson, the author of Nullifying God. And first of all, Dr. Bob, I want to congratulate you. You've had some pretty good success on your book here lately. Some nice reviews and some good interviews.
Some of the reviews have come through, especially from the Michael Brown podcast that I did. Got a couple of solid comments like that, like, where has this been all my life? This is exactly the kind of thing we're looking for. And the thing that interests me is, although it's not widely read yet, every comment comes back from people who have read this thing. It's like 5 stars, that's it. This is what we've been looking for. So there is a niche there that people say, this is what we are going to be doing.
And again, the book is called Nullifying God.
Nullifying God, Evolution's Endgame, which means evolution is ready to nullify God. That's the whole point. But it's a scientist's challenge. It says that it's science and fact, and that is what I challenge. I take them at their word and break their
break their hearts.
Break
their hearts. Yeah. That's good.
So, but
it's available locally too, right?
Yeah, available locally at DG's over in Morehead City, and of course it is available on Amazon. And any reader that would like to submit a review, I would love to have that.
Okay. Again, it's called Nullifying God.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment, it really is. It's so refreshing to see it. Most of the books that have been written in this genre are defensive.
Right.
Defensive of creation.
Of creation. You're defending the position. What I like about your book, Bob, you do that, but you do it, you're on the offense. You're taking the argument you're putting the onus on them to justify their position.
Right.
So, and that is what's so refreshing about it.
Well,
the defensive books are great, but to be able to posit a position, an argument that just is so clear, you did a really good job on that. So I just commend you on it.
Well, thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
I just want to say 2 things. First of all, that's what science is all about. You know, you are a skeptic 100% of the time. The second thing is that it goes back to an old proverb: the best defense is a good offense.
That's right.
And it's not that I want to offend anybody, but it's that you say this, you got to show me the data.
That's exactly right. No, it's excellent. It's well done.
So thank you so much.
I think it's a proverb from John Wooten from UCLA, but it's still the right thing. All right, so let's talk today about it. We're actually going to spend time on a couple of subjects in a couple of different ways, and one of them, the first one, is about the move of the embassy to Israel. And let's start with the New York Times article on that, which says, amid debate and violence, Trump delivers embassy victory to Christian base, by Elizabeth Dias. While the opening of the American embassy in Jerusalem has triggered violence and political debate this week, we can question the premise there. It also stands as a sharp reminder of the close ties between the Trump administration and evangelical Christians, and of the victories that Mr. Trump has delivered for his evangelical base. Against a backdrop of violence on the Gaza border, with Israeli soldiers killing dozens of Palestinians, a who's who of Mr. Trump's evangelical backers were present in Jerusalem to celebrate the formal relocation of the embassy from Tel Aviv on Monday. The split-screen images of fury and jubilee were striking, with many of the American guests trying to keep the focus on the achievement of their long-held goal. This is this article is not without its lean, is hardly objective, and you can just tell from the very premise alone that that it triggered the violence. That we got to remember, this was on the day of the anniversary of the United Nations recognizing the Charter of Israel. This was also at the culmination of a 30-day program by the Palestinians. This was not a singular event, which then caused something else to happen.
Well, you know, it's so predictable from the mainstream media, particularly the print media, that where they're going to go on these issues. They're pushing an agenda from the very beginning. We were talking about it beforehand, that we're seeing that the left loves to hate Israel, which is such a contradiction to everything that they claim to hold sacred. You know, that this suddenly the David, in the David and Goliath analogy, they've reversed it. And, you know, Israel is now Goliath, and the Palestinians are little David. And they've completely distorted the reality of the situation over there.
I think the thing that strikes me about this is the unbelievable double standard that they have. Hypocrisy is what it comes down to. And one of the things that Jesus, he condemned time after time after time after time, was hypocrisy. But that's what we're looking at here. There's the fact that the movement of the embassy was put into law back in the Clinton administration?
1995.
Yeah, 1995. And then Clinton kicked the can down the road. George Bush kicked the can down the road. Obama kicked the can down the road. And now when it becomes a reality, all of a sudden Trump is giving in to his evangelical Christian base.
Yeah. It was part of the Democratic platform for at least 3 elections.
Yeah.
So this is nothing new. This is just to go back to the hypocrisy claim. This is about the recognition of reality. It is the capital.
It is. It has been, and it has been for over 3,000 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and that's the part that, you know, we're seeing the revisionism coming into the historical records, and now the Islam claims that Israel never existed there. I mean, we're talking about detaching truth from reality. They have just unattached it from what is real. And they're claiming it's a different truth, and it's a truth that's based on feelings rather than facts. Yep. And that's what we've seen in this worldview shift that's taken place. Kind of the popular culture has moved away from facts. It's not, and although they claim it, I mean, like you said, if liberals didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all. and that's sadly, it's a joke, but we laugh because it's kind of true. They say one thing, that's hypocrisy, it was the mask, actors were hypocrites, and they acted out this thing that they were not. And that's what we're seeing now. And what liberalism historically was, this is a perverse distortion of what liberalism really is. And so, we've got, this is a major thing. So what just took place in Israel, of course, evangelical, Bible-believing Christians are going to say, rightly so, Jerusalem, the city of David. This is, David set up the kingdom there. That's where it happened, because that's where Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice. I mean, this goes all the way back. You can't divorce this from history.
Well, I think that you just said the word divorce, Robert, and I totally agree with that, because Christians cannot divorce themselves from Judaism, from Israel. Exactly. We can't. We are the children of that. And to see the embassy move back again, that is something where we can do nothing but stand up and cheer, because that's one of the best things in the world. But the problem with Islam is that also puts the lie to their claims about Temple Mount, because they just don't hold up according to facts. However, they will not give up that claim, because giving up that claim would be a very wet blanket on what they preach.
Yeah, and as you said, this goes back. If this goes back to Abraham, this goes back for both of our faiths, actually.
That's exactly right.
So in fact, all three. Let's put it that way. And we got to remember, evangelical Christians are not Jews. They believe that Christ came to fulfill the law. And is the fulfillment of the law, and we pray that Jews will come along one day with that as well. I mean, and others.
Well, it's fascinating. All you have to do is go to the book of Romans and read from Romans 9 to Romans 12, basically, and that entire part of Romans it answers these questions. Paul addresses this head on, and he talks about it, about this new covenant that God has made with what Christianity, what we call Christianity, but it's this new covenant, and it's not like you said. Christ came not to abolish or destroy the law, but to fulfill
it. Exactly.
And so we're seeing the two covenants, the old covenant and the new covenant, coexist together.
Right.
And we also follow that Jesus said he did not come to bring peace, but to bring a sword.
That's right.
And this sharp division now is becoming clearer and clearer.
Yeah.
We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the talk station FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the talk station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and I'm Ben Ball, along with the Reverend Robert Cornegie and Dr. Bob Wilson, and we are talking in that first segment about the move of the embassy in Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a fact that just simply brings to fruition a law that was passed 25 years ago and was one of President Trump's promises. Now, the media has portrayed that as causing uprest in Gaza and causing the Israel to they say to attack Gaza, and so the facts of or disassociation with reality, put it that way, was addressed by U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley. And PJ Media writes that on Tuesday morning, Nikki Haley spoke at the United Nations Security Council meeting regarding the embassy move in Israel, and the violence in Gaza took place on Monday. Ambassador Haley's remarks were perfect and on point. This is a PJ Media opinion piece. That's her style. She calmly and deliberately carpet bombs the USNC, the United Nations Security Council, with reality. I asked my colleagues here at the Security Council who among us would accept this type of activity on your border. No one would. No country in this chamber would act with more restraint than Israel has. In fact, the records of several countries here today suggest they would be much less restrained. Let's repeat that last bit for emphasis. I was quoting Ambassador Haley. So the records of several countries here suggest that they would be much less restrained. This is this is just, and it goes on. The article goes on to cite a lot of things that blame lots of different entities for the violence that goes back again. We have to go back centuries, really, to really talk about this.
Yeah, that's right. Back to, frankly, the sons of Abraham, Ishmael and Isaac. I mean,
right.
It goes back to that. And there was a blessing given to Ishmael, 12 sons. There would be 12 sons of Isaac. And these two lines parted ways. And it's reckoned back to that. Mm-hmm. And really, when you look at the historical record, it goes back to the identification. I mean, obviously the Jews identify themselves as the sons of Isaac, and the Palestinians, the Muslims in this case, which is sort of the umbrella term for that group, the Arabs. Mm-hmm. Specifically identify themselves with the sons of Ishmael. So this conflict is nothing new, folks. It didn't begin in 1948,
right?
When the decision was made
Or in 1967, when during that Israeli war that they captured the Gaza Strip.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
Didn't begin there.
So we're seeing this. This is goes way back, and it's ancient, and and there have been offenses on both sides all the way back. So you have to say that that there have been times for both, and there's plenty of responsibility to be shared in this process. However,
and you look at Hamas firing rockets into Israel. You have Iran firing rockets, which is Hamas is basically their surrogate.
Yeah.
There.
So the big question is a one state or two state solution, and this is what's been debated. For not forever, but since Clinton, I guess, when he had that peace agreement and the Oslo Accords and all of that, the Palestinian and all Arafat and all that stuff. This has gone all the way back. One state in which the Arabs and the Jews, the Muslims and the Jews live together in under a democratic government, or a two-state solution where you have two separate nations living side by side with hostilities. The only problem is Israel has recognized, has been pushing for the two-state solution historically, and and recognize the legitimacy of a Palestinian state. But that is not shared from the other side.
No.
And so the people that are creating the violence in around the Israel issue are the ones who say that Israel does not have the right of existence.
Well, and here, before we went on air, we talked about Leon Uris and some of the works he does. And what he brings up is that the Palestinian, not the average Palestinian necessarily, but the Palestinian big guys, they just want to get rid of Israel.
Correct.
They want to get rid of every Jew. They want to put them under submission. They just want to extinguish and get rid of Israel. And that is the attitude, and that is something that is not going to change. It's not going to change. And the way we're handling it today is kind of like a Neville Chamberlain approach.
Yeah.
Which is just nothing but appeasement.
Right.
Appeasement, give in, instead of confronting and trying to say, look, we've got to get this thing worked out. Scream, yell, shout, do whatever you want, but this has got to be worked out.
You got to remember that there are other opportunities for the Palestinian state to be recognized. It could be in Syria. I mean, it could have been over time. Syria could have played a role in that. Lebanon could have played a role in that. All these countries could have played a role in creating a Palestinian state if they had desired, but their desire is to keep that area in poverty, in unrest, and a thorn in Israel's side. That's their desire.
This whole movement that's happening at the border is what they're calling it. The Palestinians, the Arabs, are calling it a return to the homeland. Mm-hmm. So that's why they're attacking the gate. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to get across the fence. Mm-hmm. They're saying we're coming back to our homeland. Mm-hmm. Well, historically, if you go all the way back to 1948, when Israel was declared a state, and the war broke out, it was actually the Arabs said, leave now, because we're going to destroy this new state. The Jews don't have a chance because we outnumber them, whatever the number was. I mean, and they were confident that they were going to wipe this little remnant of Jews out. And it went the other way. Mm-hmm. And so now they have this dilemma because they basically left. The majority of the Arabs that were in that area left. Now, there are Arabs that live in Israel right now.
Right, sure.
And have remained, and many of them Christians. Mm-hmm. And so, and Muslims. Mm-hmm. And so there is this model of living together in peace, but it's been rejected, as you said, from the political side.
Yes, even Lebanon had that model too for a while.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly
the Lebanon
right.
Christians that ran the government.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
But this has been subverted. Now, This also brings up, though, and Michael Brown addresses this in his article in Stream that's called, "Is God Finished with Israel?" Because we have to look at why is our allegiance? Why do we feel so strongly about that? And he writes, "Is God finished with Israel? Is he done with the Jewish people as a people? Heaven forbid." All of Scripture and history shouts no to this question. Paul addressed it directly, asking, "So I ask, did they," speaking of the Jewish people as a whole, "stumble in order that they might fall? By no means." Or in the words of King James Version, "God forbid." So despite Israel's rejection of Jesus as Messiah, Israel has not fallen beyond the point of recovery. Rather, as Paul writes in Romans 9:4, speaking again of non-believing Jews, they are Israelites, and to them belong the adoption, the glory of the covenants, the giving of the law, and the worship and the promises. This is and you know Michael Brown, you know him, and you know his background too as a Messianic Jew.
That's exactly right. He was raised a Jew, just like Jay Sekulow was raised a Jew and became what we call a Messianic Jew or a completed Jew, in that they believe that Jesus truly was is the Messiah, and so they've been able to put those two parts together. But for the average Jew, that's an oxymoron.
Yep.
That a Jew cannot be a Christian and a Jew at the same time.
So we have to understand what is our understanding of this nation. Is Israel a Jewish state, or is it a state that happens to have Jews that live there?
Yes,
so
it's both.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, it was not a religious movement per se. It was a political movement. They called them Zionists, and they came out of Europe. The European intellectuals that survived from the wars, and they settled there and wanted to set up a homeland. But it was a nationalistic. It wasn't a religious.
Yep.
Although there were religious Jews involved in it, and there always have been. So you can't say, that the religious element has no influence on the political element. It does. It very much does. And you're seeing it more and more as that grows. And now there's this new phenomenon of, Christian Jews that are going back to the land and having an impact on this whole thing.
But I think you look at the movement of the embassy back to Jerusalem, and this is like our land, the historical land, is coming alive again. This is a cause for rejoicing among the Jewish population, because here is Jerusalem, Zion, that we have this again. People recognize this, and the symbolism of the move of the embassy is the important thing, because that focuses on the fact that area is, in fact, Israel.
Yeah. Well, as Christians, there are different positions on this, but the sort of basic position, the Orthodox position, if you want to say that with a little o, not a big O,
right,
capital O, is that God is not finished with Israel, with the people of Israel, the Jews. That he is going to complete, and it goes back to Daniel, quite frankly. He's going to complete that relationship that was started then, and it will be completed. The church is just a part of that process. We have not replaced the Jews as the apple of God's eye.
No, and we never will.
No.
And
Reverend Robert Cornegy, Dr. Bob Wilson, and I'm Ben Ball. We'll have more in a moment after this. Welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball with Dr. Bob Wilson and also Reverend Robert Cornegy. And we're talking about a couple of things we're going to make a big jump, actually, from the last couple of topics. This one is about the court decision that came out earlier this week concerning sports gambling and what it has to say about the 10th Amendment, what it may say about even Christian activities in the future. This one is first going to start with what's from SB Nation, and it's an article that says, with the passing of legalized sports gambling, let the hypocrisy reign. By now, you are likely aware, and this is written by Alan Rucker, by now you're likely aware the ripples cascading through the sports world with yesterday's Supreme Court decision to overturn the case that made sports gambling illegal anywhere other than Las Vegas. Like most court rulings, it's not as simplistic as a 10-word recap, but but at its most basic form, it has removed the impediment that made gambling on sports illegal. It has not made it legal per se, but has basically paved the way for individual states to legalize it on their own terms without pesky federal law getting in the way. You can read the brief overview, but welcome back. It says after you've read it, it says now what will likely happen, the states will fall in one of the camps. It says the first camp will be the ones who quickly pivot to make it legal in their state. The second camp that will eventually legalize it after much wrangling and hand-wringing. The third camp is where we'll be residing today. That's the camp, like my home state of Kentucky, populated by people who let their personal religious beliefs or overall morality be the driving force behind their political action and policy barometer. Now, on the surface, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Everyone has to have some kind of metric or measure. But my main criticism now is that politicians and Puritans alike look at sports gambling as some seedy, dark underbelly poised to take down a society that's just peachy as it is. Newsflash, it isn't, and further newsflash, it won't. This is interesting. He's talking about Kentucky, and he's saying, "Well, this is a race. This is a place that has the Kentucky Derby, which you bet on there, and already has legal lotteries going on in the." State, and so he says it's kind of it's sort of a hypocrisy to rest on a moral ground to say that sports gambling is somehow going to be different, morally than that. This is an argument that's going to have a lot of people taking a lot of different or struggling with their positions. I mean, don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I read this and I'm going, what in the world is going on here? My initial reaction to it is we don't need more gambling. Sports gambling is just nothing that I would get into in the first place. But it give people the option of doing what they want, and it's going to go all over the map.
This is what most of the commentators I've listened to, a lot of sports commentators are saying, and I think that generally what he's saying is just simply that it is, well, let's talk about the move to Tel Aviv. It's recognizing a reality that gambling is happening now, and the states are saying, wait a minute, there's money to be made. We're not getting any of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, this is on several different levels. I mean, from the Supreme Court's position, Alito particularly, it was that he was coming from a federalist position, which is a states' rights position. That this is an issue that the federal government, and this is something that the Trump administration was elected to do. Was to push back on this creeping federal power, the power of the federal government, and that federalism basically states that the power for social change, the experimentation, is in the states,
right?
And that the federal government cannot reach into the state house or into the people, and this law did just that,
right?
It told state legislatures how to vote or not vote, and it also said that individuals can't participate in this. So it was a foul on both two areas. And so from the conservative point of view, maybe you could say the libertarian point of view as well, that the federal government should not be in these areas. But then there's all kinds of consequences from that.
But again, it's kind of divorcing our Christian ideals from this to the founding fathers' ideals of the 10th Amendment, saying that the rights that come to the government are enumerated and rare. They are to be coming up from the people to the government, not vice versa.
Exactly.
And the 10th Amendment was to say those that are not enumerated in this document in the Constitution are to come back to the state.
One of the things that struck me is that this is almost a Pandora's box. One of the articles that we got that you sent up and pointed out that, what about marijuana? the federal government can regulate that or can't regulate that. The FDA certainly has something. They've classified it as a Schedule 2 or Schedule 1 drug, but it's widely used. There are laws now looking at marijuana, and if they were to say, throw up their hands and say, okay, you federal government, you can't regulate anything about marijuana. Of course, the states could, but where does that lead?
Well, this is where we're going to. I think in our last segment, we're probably going to get a little bit more into that side of some. There are some that are on the liberal side who are also hailing this decision.
Right. Exactly.
So we'll get into that. But there are some. There's another article from ChristianHeadlines.com that said that Christian groups speak out against Supreme Court gambling decisions. Some Christian conservative groups say they're planning to challenge a Supreme Court ruling that ended a federal ban on sports gambling outside of Nevada. The Supreme Court's ruling came this week, reversing a 1992 law that banned sports betting in every state except Nevada. And kind of they don't really say exactly how that challenge would take place. It'd have to be another law that gets challenged that goes that makes it all the way to the Supreme Court, but to challenge the Supreme Court's decision. But what kind of this dovetails from the other article where the guy was talking about Kentucky and how states are going to wrangle. Some states are going to jump on it. Some are going to wrangle over it for a while. Is that as Christians, is our job here to try to challenge this on the federal level, or if we are opposed to it, if Christian groups are opposed to it, do they challenge it? Isn't the proper venue to challenge it at the state level?
Yeah, it goes back. I believe it was Madison that said, that the system of government that we have is for a moral people. And the implication of that is that there is a common sense of morality that's shared by the majority of people in this nation. Therefore, you can have it break down, be a states' rights issue because we have this commonality about what's moral, what's immoral. And so what that law passed was trying to do was say, we've got this cancer. It's called gambling, and we're going to isolate it. We're going to quarantine it to four actually states that were at that time doing it. But we're going to quarantine it and put it over here in Nevada and I guess, New Jersey.
New Jersey actually is the one that fought this law.
Yeah, I know it. It's weird, isn't it? Because of Atlantic City. Yeah, but it was Maryland, and I don't remember exactly.
Atlantic City doesn't have sports books, though.
Yeah, well, that's true. But so the idea being that the state has an interest in preserving morality, and that one of the big problems, of course, with gambling is that it's historically been a big part of what was called the mob.
Right.
The mob came in and the syndicates
built Vegas
and take over this, and it becomes this corrupting, and along with gambling you get the pornography and the prostitution and all kinds of lascivious activities.
Yes.
and so now they're saying, oh well, who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We can make money off of it.
Yeah, because we make money off of it.
And so the shift of the state has been from protecting the public to preying on the public.
Which we have done with the lottery, too.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, if that goes back to the morality, though, we're supposed to share a common morality. And what this says is throw it out the window.
Yeah, exactly.
Do what, as they used to say in the 1960s, do your own thing, man.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's going to, I think it's going to come back to bite people.
Well, it's a good point. Good question you raised, Ben, about what is the position of the church. Mm-hmm. And so that article is talking about that there are organizations within the church that we're in, on the meter of morality meter, we're all the way over in the red zone. Mm-hmm. I mean, and the needle is bouncing in the red zone, and it's getting ready to go towards black. And we're not in the green zone, and that we're looking at this as another step in the process of abandoning that corporate morality that we have has always been sort of the foundation of the way we relate to one another as a nation.
Instead, to revive a very old joke, is that in a different way. It says we have decided who we are. We're just negotiating the price.
That's right.
This is where we are. That we have chipped away at these moral foundations as being a national foundation. That's gone.
Yeah.
That is completely gone now. And so we have to, I think perhaps sometimes our best hope as Christians is consider the government as amoral or amoral.
That's right.
And so perhaps it can be influenced, but it is not going to be the governing rule.
Well, the government in the case of abortion is immoral. I mean, it's beyond amoral. Mm-hmm. It is immoral because it's advocating for immoral activity. And so that's where we really have to see. The Benham brothers that spoke at our pregnancy center conference have written a book called Living Amongst the Lions, and it's a reference analogy to Daniel.
Well, I had an interesting conversation with a constitutional expert on this about the 10th Amendment. And what if a true honoring of the 10th Amendment, what other things could come back to the state? And we'll talk about that in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, Reverend Robert Carnegie, and also Dr. Bob Wilson. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball with Reverend Robert Carnegie and also Dr. Bob Wilson. And Dr. Bob, you had mentioned about the sports gambling ruling opening a Pandora's box, and that's kind of where I want to go with this now, because the article out of Slate magazine says 3 cheers for federalism. Slate not known for being conservative. You could say they are probably on the liberal side of libertarian. Justice Alito's fantastic opinion striking down the federal ban on sports betting shows federalism can be good for liberals. That's the subtitle. It says in here, Monday's decision by Murphy versus NCAA revolves around the federal government's ability to limit sports gambling by playing favorites among states. In 1992, Congress passed the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act in an effort to set federal limits. But in this argument now, though, it went to the argument that the 10th Amendment, I'm going to skip down a couple paragraphs, it says the Supreme Court has explained that this doctrine derived from the 10th Amendment prevents Congress from achieving its policy goals by coercing state lawmakers, an action that New Jersey argued is precisely what Congress has done to 46 states through PASPA, this act that made illegal sports gambling. Now, what they're saying, this is to your point, Dr. Bob, about opening Pandora's box, is that what else, how wide, the guy that I talked to said this is a broad opinion, it's not a narrow opinion, that recognizes the 10th Amendment as what's not enumerated in the Constitution reversed to the states. I said, then does this mean that there could be perhaps a successful challenge to the marriage, the idea of marriage not being outside of a state's purview? Or abortion.
When I said Pandora's box, I mean, literally, that was one of when I was a kid, my grandmother read me Aesop's Fables, and we got to Pandora's box, and that has stuck with me all the years, that all of the miseries came out of Pandora's box, but there was one thing left in Pandora's box, and that was hope. That is our God. But as far as the actual practical applications of this law, basically it says that federal cannot regulate anything that goes on in a state. And that means anything.
Well, one of the things I brought up, I think is going to be, obviously this is just a few days old, is what about unfunded mandates? The entire Department of Education, about other things that are not enumerated in the Constitution. For example, and again, this is where Christians are going to divide a lot, is remember that when the drinking age was made 18 really across the nation because the Federal Department of Transportation threatened to withhold highway funds unless your state law was changed, unless your state legislature voted to change that. That seems to be precisely the argument.
That's right.
In this. So what's that going to mean? What kind of Pandora's box is that going to open up?
Yeah.
If they
yeah.
can follow the money.
Well, they'd follow the money, yes, but you can take that anywhere. I mean, sure, drinking age, but what else? Voting age?
Yeah.
All kinds of things.
Voting age is enumerated in the Constitution.
The federal government will have no say in.
Yeah.
There will be no uniformity. And that is very troubling in many ways.
This is also called the anti-commandeering doctrine, and it's been used about handgun regulations, been used about radioactive waste, according to this article. But liberals could say that what about marijuana? What about drug laws? That something again regulated within a state.
Yeah, that is the great illustration. Pandora's box problem is that you're letting all the fairies out.
Yes,
the good
right.
ones and the bad ones, and so then you have to deal with that. And so this is going to be in the courts for years.
Forever.
This is a lawyer's dream to be for this thing passed because I mean it's going to tie up. All kinds. They have literally opened Pandora's box for the Supreme Court,
the government one,
yeah, because on a states' rights level, where is precedent? Who? What is the authority? The Constitution is pretty clear, as you were going through that process, that anything that's not specifically enumerated in the Constitution as a power of the federal system belongs in the state system, states, and the people of the states.
Here's a local practical example that I just thought of, and we'll see how this plays out. The Neuse River exists entirely in the state of North Carolina. Does not cross the state boundary, so it's entirely under the purview of the state government.
Right?
Does the EPA have anything to say? About what gets dumped into it or not?
Well,
or is
under
it all
the Obama EPA regulations, yes, but hasn't that been reversed?
Well, some of that has been, yes, but that's part of the goal, I think, of the
is to get it back to this,
But,
and the principle is that these kinds of decisions are best made by the people that are going to be affected by it.
Yep.
In other words, a local
entity needs to be making these decisions rather than a federal bureaucrat somewhere in D.C. or whatever.
Well, the No Child Left Behind from the federal government about here you're going to and this affects what we've talked about with sex education about the money coming down, coming down from federal sources.
There have been a lot of people that thought that this whole Department of Education and of the environment and all of these things were overreach by the federal government. Yep. They were. It is not within their enumerated responsibilities in those areas. It's not there, and so this is a pretty interesting step. If the principle is that government has gotten too big, and we need to shrink government, federal government, then this has to be part of the process of doing that. But it's like we've said, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I think I just one other real quick point, because I thought when some of the Hobby Lobby decision came down that we cheered, some of the things that we said is that as Christians we can't rest on something sometimes what we see as a federal victory, because this may not be, and so Christians have to. We're going to have to be engaged on the local. We love to look at federal government and talk about how they're awful and terrible. I mean, we do, but we're going to have to look at our local issues. If more things end up being decided on a local and state basis that we could just say that we could wash our hands of before and say, oh well, that's a federal mandate. If more things are decided, we're going to have to be more involved, more engaged.
Well, there's going to be a checkerboard because, for example, you went to Hobby Lobby. I remember some years back when we had Amendment 1 to the Constitution of the North Carolina Constitution, and I remember that was the marriage amendment. Marriage belongs to one. Well, that was fine. Everybody's really on board with that. But then our current governor
opposed it. Yeah.
He would not defend that. He would
Right.
not.
As
He
the AG.
Yeah, he said, as the Attorney General, I believe this is not right. I will not defend it. Wait a minute. This is what the people have decided. This is what the state has decided. But
it's a constitutional amendment.
yeah, it's a constitutional amendment. But what we're going to wind up with is a patchwork where this is legal in this state, this is not legal in this state. And what about going back to the voting age that we started talking about earlier?
Well, that's enumerated in the Constitution, though.
Yeah, it is.
So, but however, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I
we had a
didn't-
constitutional amendment to change it from 21 to 18.
Okay, because I was going to say
and you used to have to own land.
Yeah,
the
but that was a
liberals at
state
this
issue.
point are shooting for 16.
Yeah.
And so if it is in the Constitution, then we're safe there. But are we?
But here's another one, though. For example, divorce law. We recognize that the states control divorce law, but not marriage law. So, for example, North Carolina does not have common law marriage, and does not recognize common law divorce either. So this is an issue that, yes, there is a patchwork, but that actually has been from our founding. There's been a patchwork.
It was purposefully done that way.
Yeah.
Now, the overarching, the context in which those documents were drafted and approved was in the context that there was a Judeo-Christian worldview that dominated the nation. And so that was the commonality that we shared. As Christians now, this is it. All politics are local.
Right.
I mean, we really do have to be involved in the moral decisions that are being made by our local government entities, whether it's a school board or whether it's the,
state legislature.
State legislator, all the way through. We have to be involved at the county level, at the municipal level,
because if
at the state level.
if various challenges are successful, which is it will have to be. I mean, things will remain federal law until they are challenged.
Right.
So the various challenges that will come up over the decades to come, because this will be decades.
This is
is that Christians are going to have to be ready to say, where do I stand here?
Yeah.
And I think they're going to. I think on this one, I think there will be a lot of them are going to be pretty ambivalent about it. So we'll see. Anyway, thank you, Dr. Bob and Reverend Robert Cornegie. We'll have more next week on Faith Matters.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.